Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, Episode 58, Luca and Codex Inversus. Alright, I'm here today talking with Luca about his world Codex Inversus, which is a pretty cool name. So, hi Luca, how you doing?
Hi, fine, thank you. Hope I find you well too.
Yeah. We just had a holiday here in America where we had a Thanksgiving Day where we all
Oh,
get
of
together with our
course,
families. And yeah.
of course, of course. So eating a lot of turkey and stuff like that.
Oh, my family's vegetarian, so we actually have spanakopita instead.
Okay. So there is not the same like naps afterward, the same sleepy
No,
feeling.
no. Yeah, lots of butter, but yeah, not quite the same. And you're from Italy, right? So
Yes,
you,
I'm from Italy. And
yeah.
so Christmas is coming, and that will be a marathon in eating. The day before Christmas Day, and then the leftover on the 26th. That are all
Yeah,
uh, holiday days. So
yeah. I feel like that's a,
it will be
a
long.
holiday around the world. Yeah, even in like Japan, which has like no history of that, it's like a holiday there for some reason.
Well,
I guess they
yes, I
like
knew
it.
that there's this vague, like a romantic feeling that it's something like more from husband and wife to go together more than a family holiday. That New Year's Eve, I think it's a family holiday there or something. So they
Yeah,
have adapted and changed it a bit to suit their taste,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah. And everybody's got their winter holidays, no matter what
Yeah.
country they're in. Well, yeah. Before we get started talking about your world and
Mhm.
all the RPG stuff you're creating, I wanted to hear about who you are outside of RPGs.
Okay, so I was born near Venice in the hills of the Prosecco wine, and then for university I moved to Bologna, the land of lasagna, and of
Hmm.
university, since it's the oldest university in Europe. And then I stayed here because I got involved in publishing, especially in comics.
Hmm.
And after years, right now, my main job is writing comics. And I also teach some creative writing for comics in a couple of private schools. And
Oh, cool.
sometimes I do other like publishing stuff, like usually school books and stuff, or graphic layout and something like that.
Yeah. And do you do that for like comic books or for newspapers or both?
For mainly for comic book, the thing is that here the main like popular comic book are 100 pages.
Oh,
So
okay.
I do a couple, two or three a year because I need all the time to write 100 pages of stuff.
Yeah. That's much longer.
And so the creative team change each month.
Mhm.
Then of course I did also some graphic novel, other stuff, other format. Unfortunately, here newspaper like strips are no more. But I can do. There is no a lot of other comics option to do comics because
Mm.
fortunately Italy is one of the biggest markets for comics. I mean, after of course France, Japan, and the US, but I think we are like fourth place. So,
Yeah. There's definitely some Italian comics I've read before.
mm, yeah, for example, there are a lot of artists that work in the US, for example, because there are a lot of people doing comics here.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I feel like comic interests often overlap with
Oh,
RPGs pretty frequently.
oh yes, the nerddom, the vague fantasy and fantastic genre, all they touch together in a way.
Yes, exactly. So what did you get you started doing RPGs?
I always was interested in RPGs. I started play in something around 92, 93 with the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons second edition.
Hmm.
I kind of lost a bit the track my years on university when the third edition came out, and then in like 8 years ago, I came back to the hobby because I found some colleagues that were all interested in doing RPGs, and
Hmm.
since we all are all work in the same area, there was also some like interest in seeing what was the best book, what are the best illustration stuff. So we tried different systems, just try different books. But in the end, we end up with a long campaign. We are 5 years in of
Oh, wow.
Dungeons and Dragons First Edition.
Oh,
Yes,
that is pretty long.
it's, we are finally starting to get some results against our boss after just 5 years. Uh, but like the pact was to start from level 1 and end up level 20. And
Hmm.
probably we won't get to literally 20 level, but we are near. We are at 14 right now, so I mean, I guess we have still higher, at least ahead of us. So we'll probably get.
That's longer than most campaigns for sure.
Oh yes, yes. And so I kind of always be interested, and one of the idea was also maybe also start making it like as another outlet for creativity and for the stuff.
Uh-huh, of course.
And in fact, because at first, I mean, comics is a wonderful medium. I love it, but there is the pro and con that you have to always work with another person, the artist, if you write the artist. And
Right.
sometimes artists can be very frustrating because they don't uh, give you the stuff on time, they have their opinions, and they don't match. And so I started to double in doing illustration by myself, using collages and reworking existing artwork. But then, of course, I'm a writer, so I say, well, I can put some lore to the art. And then I say, well, all this lore to the art can be interconnected. And one of the first idea was to do a RPG setting. Then I was like swayed in another direction, but now I'm coming back to a more focused RPG approach.
Yeah, I think it's like I looked at a lot of the stuff and it's really interesting, like the way you're presenting it, and having it be focused around the art makes it much more evocative, especially the art style you've chosen, like this sort of Renaissance style.
Yes, because I had some people that asked me to use the illustration in the campaign in the pattern, and the main focus is, oh, it's so wonderful to have so much art, so I can use it as a handout for the players when there's a PNG or something, and that really works.
So from what you said in the survey, you haven't actually DM'd yet. You're just sort of creating a world, right?
Yes, because the fact is that this big campaign doesn't leave much space to do other stuff. And at
Uh-huh.
first,
Yeah.
yes, we will find a way to like doing some session on this world, but there was never an occasion. And there was people following the project that, in fact, told me, "Oh, I've done some session in this part of your world, this part of your world, this part of your world." So I asked if it was going well, what were the problems, stuff. But me, like I didn't have the first-hand experience on what to do and how it works as effectively as a play setting, or rather a setting to play in. Because there are some things that are clearly more like literary inspired, and other that are more game usable. So I want to see
Mhm.
what works and what not works. To what do I
Yeah.
like not.
So you you actually haven't other people have used your work, but you haven't yet?
Yes.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, that's good. And sometimes the people ask me, "Oh, but what's happened in there?" And there I do on the fly lore, filling in some gap in the lore for them, so they are like correctly in canon every time, which is very silly. like worry, but I mean, I'm there usually just a paragraph of text, so it's fine.
Well, that's really neat to have something that's sort of successful, even though you don't have personal experience with it. It means you're doing a really good job, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, at this point, give me a deadline, and at the start of next year to have some part of the world, some nation to written down, and then find a group to play with them. Because I mean, it's time that
Hmm.
I test and I have also fun with stuff, not only other people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, many people like start running D&D with no prep at all as DM, and you've done an immense amount for the
Yes,
background of the world. So,
yes,
uh,
the reverse. I've indulged in one of the worst plans for any writer or even DM to over prep so much that at that point you don't have really a place to start.
mm. Well, I guess one place to start for talking about what you're doing is the name of the world, Codex Inversus. It's I'm curious why you picked the name.
I picked the name because, well, Codex is always a work in this book, mix collection.
Hmm.
And in Versus, because my idea was to like turn upside down some cliches and some stereotypes and some assumptions.
Okay.
And for example, one of the first idea was to make both the like more evil and devil and hell side of the world have some good point. Is not completely bad, and the good side of the angels, the celestial side, has this problem well. So like do this bad is good, good is bad in a very
Hmm.
simplistic way, but also try to work through some fantasy stereotypes of like what would I expect of elves, of onions, of orcs, and try to
Okay.
give in another light. So
All right. So it's inverting people's expectations. Is kind of what you were going with.
yeah, a little bit, but not in a very like subverting and shocking way. But it's like it's familiar, but also not really familiar. So like you can recognize them, but they are like twisted in a way,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
upside down.
Yeah. And I think kind of playing with people's expectations for at least angels is a pretty common theme in
Mm.
more modern fiction,
Oh
where
yes, of
angels
course.
sort of have too high expectations for what people should be doing.
Oh yes, yes. No, that is quite is almost common at this point. Now, one of the interesting things is was to push the idea of moral relativism in a way to the
Hmm.
extreme. So everyone, every faction, and every people, every races has this bad apple and good apple in a way, and so to humanize them all. In fact, one thing that I also wanted is that there are no other dimension, there are no gods, they are all gone. Everything is immanent to the world, so everything is some way human.
Gotcha. Okay. And another thing along the name Codex Inversus
Mhm.
is I I get from your explanation that that might not be the name of the actual world within
No,
the fiction and the lore.
no. In fact, the world itself doesn't have a name. The two main continents have a name. The north continent is Axam, and the southern continent is Uxali. But the word itself doesn't have a name because I never came up with one that satisfied me. So it's still called the word.
Oh, okay. Well, good enough. Well, yeah, let's get started. I feel like the defining thing about the world within the lore, from what I read in your survey, was
Mhm.
this war between heaven and earth. So let's start there.
So the idea is that there is a creator god, the demiurge, I don't know what's that, demiurge, let's say, that
Hmm.
created the world, but the world was not perfect. So he left the management of creation to various gods, and he went away to create a more perfect world. The point, of course, these gods are quite have worldly personality, opinion, and in the end, the god devoted to the other world, to the afterlife, that were the angels and the devil, fought each other, dragging in the conflict all other called divinities in the world.
Hmm.
So there were these like Genie, like Tao, Ifrit, Marid stuff that were the elemental gods. There were a
Hmm.
god of order and a god of chaos, and other minor gods that all fought together, and this caused the collapse of all the various uh, other dimensions, like the heaven, the elves, the elemental plane, etc., all ended up on the material plane, the world. In the end, the war ended in a stalemate, and they put all together to write this accord of peace between each other, and they divided the world. The problem is that without this other dimension, they became mortal and eventually died. But
Ah, okay.
their descendants continued their mission, their ideology, their point of view throughout history.
Okay, so there was some war between all these different outsiders, and they
Yes,
that collapsed reality into one dimension,
yes,
basically.
yes.
Okay.
And one thing is that also like magic now is like a force of nature, is immanent to the world. Like the electromagnetic field, there is the mana field. There is nothing outside
Mhm.
our their material reality.
That was another thing that was curious about the wording you'd used in your survey, which
Mm.
might be a translation thing, but you said your world is high magic but low mysticism. So high magic is something that I understand. Like, okay, so there's like lots of powerful beings, and maybe there's like magic shops
Mm.
where people can buy magic items and stuff like that. But low mysticism was one that I was a little puzzled by. So can you
Yeah,
explain what you meant by that?
because I choose like as a time period of Renaissance, the Renaissance, early modern era, because one of the things that I am interested is in the early scientific revolution. And so the wizards of this world are more like Galileo, Newton stuff that they try to find the laws underneath magic, and they study the natural world and how we adopt this magic. So it's considered like a, something that is around everyone. The fact that people know as a fact that there are no really transcendent God anywhere makes it that the supernatural forces are in fact not really supernatural, but are sideway natural, like a quirky aspect of the natural world.
Okay, so it's
I mean,
your meaning of that is that magic is more like a science at this point, right?
yes, in a sense,
Okay.
yes. I was interested in looking at the passage from more, let's say, not superstitious, but less analytic approach to a more analytic approach.
Okay. Yeah, so less people in pointy hats and more like sort of working with a microscope and that kind of
Yes,
thing. Uh,
exactly.
Okay. Cool, cool. So I guess that also means that like I feel like the Renaissance inspiration that you had for the art can sort of bring in this experience of the Catholic Church and their dominance and like view on witchcraft, which I'm assuming is not really present within this.
No,
Okay.
no, 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 no. There are different approaches to magic, but it's considered like these different approaches like to technology, to the modernization, development, and that they are known because it's something just unknown but knowable.
Mhm. Okay. So from what you wrote here, it looks like after the collapse of the different dimensions into just a single world, um, the war kind of stopped after that. I mean, maybe there's still bits of war going on, but can you explain like what happened after that and what led to that
Yeah,
more like
they
peaceful
said
period?
that they passed on a first they when the divinities were still alive, they had to like clean up the post-apocalyptic situation using
Hmm.
their powers, and then when they died, they started basically a cold war between the West that was devil aligned and the East was angel aligned. Um, and there were during because history from the collapse around is about 1,000 years. There and then there were some all-out war, but the main state is this like mm, this not open but like cold hostility in a way. They
Hmm.
sabotage, um, like to use proxy to wage conflict, stuff like that.
Gotcha.
Part of the idea was to there's a city that works a little like as a little Jerusalem because there are many faiths, but also a little like Berlin with the spies and
Okay.
yes, ploys and plots. And,
Gotcha. Okay. So you mentioned like the gods died. Are they
yes,
still sort of worshipped even though they're dead, or is that not really something that people do
no, no,
anymore?
yes, they are still worshipped and and they have relics of great power and sanctuary that are object of worship and devotion. The idea is that they also believe that this God that are said have some influence in our world, but that is a pure matter of faith. I mean, there is no faith in the sense there is no way to know if what they are, this influence they believe there is actually there or not. And this
Right.
was another thing I was interested in to put back this kind of faith in fantasy genre because when you know that God exists, it's kind of easy to be faithful because I mean you know that God exists and everything, and this is the idea that I have faith that the Saint Beelzebub, patron of elf and farm, will help me, but there is no actual proof of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's kind of how I've explained it as like all divine relationships in D&D end up being sort of contractual because like you know what's going to happen. Like the cleric
Yeah.
says the spell and gives an offering and then they cure someone's disease and they know what's going to happen because that's how it works.
In fact, we're entering this world, divine magic. It's simply the magic that was passed by these divinities, like they like write the set of spells, and so cleric just focus on that set of spell, while the
Mhm.
arcanist try to improve and innovate and go crazy doing new stuff, while the clerics have their well proved and godly approved set of spell. That's
Mhm.
their
That makes
business.
sense. Okay, so another question we kind of skipped over there. So this isn't Earth
Mm-hmm.
because we also have like elves and orcs and dwarves and all these other races, right?
Yes, we have all the classics.
Okay. And are they sort of separated along like country lines, or like you mentioned, like devils are in the west, or like all like the evil races like orcs and goblins and gnolls over in the west?
No, they're basically all the nation are more or less ethno-religious states in a way. So they
Hmm.
have their pieces days. They have their religion. They have more or less strong political institution that holds them. And the West has the like the devil, the All Infernal Empire, which is basically a human nation, but with
Hmm.
a tiefling aristocracy. All nobles are tiefling. So if you are horns, you are a duke, a baron, or something. There are also the elves that live up north in a sort of Icelandic situation with the volcanoes and stuff. And in
Okay.
the continent south, there are the dwarves that live the dwarf dwarf. They live in in a very desertic region with an enormous plain flat desert of salt with a second sun hanging over there.
Oh, okay.
So they live underground to avoid the scorching heat of the desert. And in the
Hmm.
east, we have the angelic unison, that is the big human nation that has a lot of Azimar, angel-blooded people around them.
Uh-huh.
There are also the orcs that are like a proud warrior race to, to make it quick. And the gnomes that are more like, it's always not a nice word to call them just exotic, but they are the weird people. And
Uh-huh.
in the center, there is a lot of island, like Greece, Dalmatia, something, which is the home of the Tritons, like fish people, but with
Uh-huh.
the legs,
Okay.
and also pirates and other unaligned person. There are also at this four corner some animal races. In the west, there are the Minotaur, the Tabaxi, the crow people, and the snake people. The crow people, Tengu, and
Uh-huh.
the Nagas as snake people, but the one with the arms and the snake face.
Okay.
And they were part of the empire and they separated because they adopted a new religion. In the east, they're still part of the unison. We have the Kitsune, we have the old people, rabbit people, and then the Teferi that are the if you I don't know if you know the Egyptian god with a scarab for a face. That
Uh-huh.
one.
I mean, I know of it.
And then there are fly people, alligator people, clam people in the south. There
Oh,
are
wow.
other.
That's more than there usually is for like the sort of animal people.
The idea was there were four kinds for like quadrant: west, east, northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. So
Okay.
16 in total. So there are 12 right now. I think I will stay there. Seems a nice number.
Okay. Yeah, that's quite a lot. And is this all within one of those continents you talked about, or is it split across the two that you've been mentioning?
These people are split across the two.
Okay,
The
gotcha.
one in the south are called the untamed tribe because they never coalesced in one nation.
Okay.
Like the gnolls, or I don't know if D&D has alligator people, crocodile people with a name. Crocodile
Okay.
people.
Yeah. I'm not sure what I'd call those, but yeah, crocodile, sure. Cayman people? I don't know.
Then the other two that missing, there are Warforged, sort of Warforged nation. That they
Hmm.
were the one following the god of order. And there are deep south in a jungle made of mechanical trees and mechanical beasts.
Ooh.
And then there is a small archipelago where there are the halflings that were the chosen one by the chaos. In fact, all these halflings looks like optical illusion. Like you can count what many fingers they have on hand. Someone maybe, or you can look at someone all seen one side, something like that.
Well, cool. That's quite a lot. And have you like detailed the cultures for all these places, or is it more just like sort
Uh,
of
yeah, some
general?
some I was able to go in quite a lot of detail because consider that at this moment I've written the equivalent of something like 200 pages, a little more probably, and almost 300 illustrations. So there is a lot of stuff.
Wow.
Probably the most developed is the empire, particularly the West Empire, that are all they have the clothing class, some features, some uses and costume, some of the more detail. But I usually ask my follower what they want to know, and I develop some of that area. So there are quite a lot of places that have a decent amount of lore, like main production, main features,
Well, that's cool.
and also in a lot of places there are these pieces of the of the other world, the other dimension, and most of them have already described how they work and what's the deal with it, and how the culture and not only culture but also flora, fauna, and environment has been warped by the presence of these pieces of extra dimension in our material world.
That's cool that you're still having that much like sort of community
Oh yeah,
involvement in the creation.
yeah, no, that's great. Uh, I have like an half a dozen of very that probably they know the lore better than me. But sometimes they correct me because they are. Sometimes I forgot some names, some dates.
I feel like that happens pretty often with creators where
Hmm.
the fans will read and reread and reread your stuff, and they end up knowing it better than you do because typically you'll write it and then move on. How often are you releasing a new piece of lore with that many going on already?
There was a need for a good year. I was able to do once a week, quite regularly. But then, of course, when life comes to
Mm-hmm.
meddle, I have to take sometimes a little more. But I'm decently regular. I mean, I may skip a week sometimes or two, but I can put an illustration and about a page, not a page, half a page of lore every week.
Okay.
If you sum that for 3 years, I mean, you can guess why.
Gotcha. So one of the things you mentioned here is that like there was this enlightened period that was set off by the blending of the different dimensions on the world. Is that something that kind of plays out kind of like the Italian Renaissance in your mind, or is there a different interpretation that you had for that?
Yeah, that is referring to this last the timeline are the last 50 years.
Okay.
That were another 50 years ago. There was another like world war, and that springed a new trust in magic because the idea of this world is that magic is very powerful, but is has always a degree of uncertainty. There are always, if you just move your pinky in a different way, everything can go awry.
Uh-huh.
And the idea that is developed enough that these accidents are less and less, and so that springboard they tested this new, I mean, technique in the battlefield, and they say, oh, magic is a good point now, and so they start to use to for more mundane things, and that meant to study it more, to develop it more, to basically try to use it and exploit it to more basic stuff. For example, one of the places is the Valley of the Light, so called, where one of the nobles asked all the wizards, come here and you do the experiment you want. The idea is that you share the result. And so there are a lot of feeding for animals to make them bigger, to change the taste of plants, to make them more nutritious, to create hybrids. For example, I don't know, a chicken cow hybrid, so you can have like egg filled with cream. It's like,
So this is
go ahead.
extreme GMOs right here.
Yeah. The problem, in fact, in the illustration I've done for this area, there are the problem is there are also like giant rabbit, Godzilla-sized rabbits that wander, causing mayhem because something got wrong. And well, for example, one of the big exports, they found a way to feed the geese, a
Hmm.
blue pigment. So you have the quill that have the ink inside them directly. And that was
Oh,
one
okay.
major uh, export of the area, for example.
That's convenient. Okay. And is in your conception of this, is the culture for these different places pretty close to like sort of the classical idea? So you mentioned sort of like a Egyptian area down south. Is that kind of still like a desert kind of culture that's sort of
Uh,
Arabic and kind of what it's presented as?
yes, the idea was that the the elemental lords, our genie, like
Hmm.
had some sort of Arabic influenced culture. And so their chosen people, let's just say, have all different ways, different, let's say, declination, interpretation, version of Middle Eastern or Ottoman culture. For example, the elves have a Persian feeling, the orcs have a more Balkan feeling, the gnomes have a more India of the Mogul feeling, while the dwarves are more North African, Egypt kind of style. But all of these something that like binds together because they come from, they are influenced by the same family of gods, you can say. So this is
Hmm.
quite common. So for example, also the alphabet are all similar and stuff like that. They also
Okay,
like,
cool.
they all like turban, for example.
Well, that's a good thing to wear in the sun for sure.
And so, for example, some of these inflections are they prepared the dwarf women are all covered in males, like completely covered in a sort. But
Okay.
the idea was that this dwarf society is in fact matriarchal. And then the point is that there are born less women than less female than male, and
Okay.
so the women are considered extremely precious, but also they are in charge because they are so precious. And so they are sheltered, but still making the decision from the back, while males are expendables and are can sent to the mines and stuff like that.
Okay. That that makes some sense actually, especially with like the sort of there's the whole thing where like what do dwarven women look like because we never see them
In
in
fact, that
a
in this
lot of
world
Lord of
nobody
the Rings.
knows because they are always also like slit for the eye, something like that.
Hmm.
That's constant.
Well, that's a cool way to do it. I like that. Let's see. One of the other things you mentioned here is that the world has two moons, which isn't that unusual for a fantasy world, but I'm curious because you're having so many inspiration from sort of the real world for parts
Yeah.
of yours. Why would you have this be different?
It's different because I was trying to like address the problem of the theory of the style of that kind of mythology because I'm not very
Okay.
familiar with it, not really into it. So I decided to, and they are all usually connected with some other world, other dimension. So I put them on the moon, and they now like work as basically aliens. There are some sightings of light. Maybe some children can be abducted and replaced with something else, or cow maybe. And
Okay.
there is one moon that is this jade moon that is the home of the fairy, and then there is the smaller moon that is the ivy counterpart in a way. This is home of horrors, nightmare, Lovecraftian stuff. And the
Ah,
idea
okay.
is that these peoples, when there was the war, the cosmic war between angels and hell, they never took a side, and they just caused problem. So when the war ended, they were banished in these two moons, and the gods create these two moons specifically as prison for them. But sometimes
Okay.
they use their basically UFOs to make a visit to the material world.
Well, one of the things that I really liked about your world was just the really amazing art that you have for it.
Mm.
And I know it's like composite art where you're like taking
Mm.
pieces from other things and putting together, but it works really well because you have this like Renaissance style to it, but you also have like an orc that doesn't feel like out of place for the style. Um, can you talk about your process for making this stuff? Because it's just so cool.
So the process started at first. I just found like some painting, some pictures I liked, and started putting stuff over them. So this is a nice portrait of a lady. It would be nice with some ram horn or maybe some deer horn or something. Oh,
Hmm.
detail here, detail there. I just came up with an heraldry shield for them or something. But more the time passed, now I have to do the reverse because I know the word and I have to illustrate what I know. Before I would just uh, go with the flow with just what struck me. But now I have to be more precise because a lot of things are already settled. So, for example, now I'm doing a lot of stuff about the Tritons that are all. I have a vague Indian inspiration because they live on the now in a place that once had the Astral plane, that is a place of the Astral, the Western plane, like the plane of mind, and there
Uh-huh.
was this attention to meditation and connectedness, empathy, and stuff. And I found out that there are not many oil paintings of Buddhist monks, so I'm kind of desperate to try and find the good stuff that is nice enough and that is appropriate enough to then transform what I'm going to do. And sometimes I'm very frustrated by myself from the past because maybe I mentioned something in passing. Oh, it would be nice if we were turtle people. And then some people ask me when we will ever know the turtle people. And I don't have idea how to do an illustration of a human person using just picture of turtles from like scientific illustration of animals. Because also I try to use as much as possible um, public domain stuff,
Mhm.
part for the respect for the artist and part because if I ever want to publish it, it's much easier.
Yeah, of
So
course.
that limits the material I have in hands.
Yeah, I think I recognized some of the little pieces that you were taking from other art. I wasn't quite sure what it was. Just like, I think I've seen that head before or something like that.
Yes. And I think I found out that I can't use too famous of the paintings because otherwise it's too obvious. For example, there was the egg cooker by Rembrandt. I, I remember correctly. And also, oh, that was painting, and that ruined the effect of sort of it's not inward artifact like something that is new and alien. The first impression is has to see an illustration and then oh wow, but this is that, and then the one the try to find the different pieces. It should be something that comes afterward.
Mhm. But still, it's really cool stuff. I think you did a great job with it, or are doing a great job with it.
Mm.
So I know you haven't run the world yet as a campaign. So usually my questions go into like what's the campaign events that have happened and that kind of stuff. Is there like a story that you want to focus on? Like,
I did gamified the post like because I asked like in a choose your adventure book I asked some question after each post, so he had
uh-huh.
done a mini adventure in a way,
Oh, okay.
and the revolved around there is nation of the Infernal Empire that is just a mega dungeon because there were the Tartarus part of hell, and so after over there is a nice grassland, and beneath is possibly endless series of caves. And I asked the protagonist was a noble, and the idea that the tiefling noble all have a grand tour when they reach 18. They got to meet one of his aunt, and it then followed these dwarves around the cave of Tartarus. That would be a perfect setup for adventure. You have to aid or go with these spelunkers to find good stuff underneath the uh, Tartarus Peninsula, how it's called.
Okay.
Then the thing gets, of course, a little crazy, but as in all adventures, so it turns out that because the idea is that there is the cave always slowly moves, so sometimes something is discovered, even if the caves are kind of known because there's displaced. And in one, there is the enormous skull of Cyclops, because the Tartarus were used as in our world, Tartarus as the jail for giant titans stuff, the big
Hmm.
people. And the idea that this, the whole of the eye is a portal. The point is that everything that all portals, I mean, a lot of these things end in the same place. There is some woods called the Elsewhere woods. Well, all things that these are lost in teleportation, space magic, etc., end up there.
Okay.
And so there were then adventure with various people from various parts of the world in these woods.
Okay. Yeah, those are some good adventure ideas. And here's a different question for you because
Mm-hmm.
like the creation process for like lore
Mm-hmm.
is interesting, but I feel like ends up being very different than designing a adventure for D&D or
Yeah.
some other system. Some of them are very lore connected, but D&D is much more like, okay, you've got your lore, but you also have to have like your monsters and your traps and your
Yeah.
treasure and this and your maps and this kind of stuff.
Yes. No, in fact, one of the whole problem that I'm having translating all the stuff in some actual usable at the table material, for example, is that in a system like D&D or similar, there is some interest in action, and for example, being so like morally gray or at least morally questioning setting, I don't have cannon fodder. I don't have goblins or orcs that I can just hand to the player to kill.
Hmm.
I don't even have undeath, because also undeath have all their background and motivation and stuff. So that I'm finding it a little problematic. Also, the idea of creating some not really realistic but not too eccentric ecosystem. I can have 2,000 apex predator all hungry for human flesh, and that is another problem to.
Yeah, I feel like movies often have a similar problem where, you want to have a bad guy and you want to have a bad guy that we don't feel like the hero shouldn't be killing. And often I feel like adventure movies kind of default to sort of Nazis. Like Indiana Jones, the enemy is always Nazis or something like that. And
So I'm short on Nazi in the setting, say. So I probably have to come up with some. Now, I have a couple, for example, in the Empire, there are the demons that are the
Mhm.
people that never wanted to accept this empire run by the devil aristocracy. They were like closed in they lived in the mountain, and they kind of experimented on themselves with filth and time to regain the glory of their fathers, their forefathers, the ancestors. They're
Mhm.
basically they're crazy, evil psychopaths. So they kind of work. And there are some, for example, places where the environment is a problem. For example, there is a place where the land is just enormous, big organism. So if the land wants to eat you eventually, what is missing is some like for every season enemies, like our goblins, old bears, stuff. But
Mhm.
I will come. I will come with them eventually. Just matter of time.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that's somewhat, I mean, I wouldn't say unique to D&D. Like, there's plenty of other, especially video games, that sort of have enemies that are like, this is a bad person. You don't have to feel bad about killing them,
Mm.
and it's fine. Um, but for a lot of other role-playing games,
Mm.
there's often like tabletop role game games
Mm-hmm.
besides D&D. There's plenty of them where killing a person, whether they're a goblin or an orc, has a lot of consequences for your character. So that's one that feels like isn't necessarily something that you have to go away from, but it might mean that your setting is maybe not the best for D&D if it's something that you are going away from.
No, in fact, there was also always a question if doing. I'm doing the right now doing the setting like a system agnostic with just
Hmm.
floor element without a system, a game system. to
Right,
refer
right.
to. But of course, since it's the system I play most, I would like to at least try to see how it will work on D&D. And yes, that will mean to put something to make player understand. Yes, this campaign will be a little less action and combat focused than the other campaign. So probably coming up with some mechanics that that incentivates the player to talk, for example, instead of
Mhm.
kill. That would be nice because the point is, yeah, the other setting is thinking more for exploration and eventually more political and relationship stuff more than
Right.
hack and slash.
Yeah, I mean it's hard because you even have like devils, which are like this, they're super evil. We should kill them, and even in your world, that's not true. So
Yeah, this usually is one of the go-to. Well, devil, of course, at least them they are clearly evil. In this case, they're just spoiled because they're noble, not really so evil
yeah,
after all.
yeah, that is very different from a lot of other settings with having sort of good devil. Well, maybe not good, but devils that you don't want to necessarily kill. So, do you have ideas for what that sort of faceless enemy might be, or are you still not sure yet? Or another thing is that might vary between different campaigns.
Yeah, I think that it depends on the campaign or on the area. So I'm also thinking to this decent size area and each to have the. For example, I was thinking and now I'm thinking about the westernmost part of the empire, that's Cocytus.
Hmm.
And the theme is that there are a lot of like Leviathan hunter, like they were whale hunting, but they hunt Leviathan and Kraken, and they're nice. But there are also rules for never combat that is kind of is messed away. And I think it was to spotlight on there's one of the few places where there are still druid, because in other places are all been like absorbed by the church.
Okay.
And so some evil druid that send animals against the player, which could be nice. I mean, it was a boss, and these minions are the control animals. That seems very nice. There are also giant seagulls that can eat you. I have some aggressive fauna that I can work with, and the other will probably send some faction of criminals, some kind of organized bandits, highway robbers, and human threats, like human.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Well, that's the way the real world is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, well, one of the threats you mentioned in your survey seems to go against what you were saying with this undead thing, where you have a anti-pope lich
Ah,
that's commanding a bunch of well, I guess they're more like
because
the
these are the like overarching threats for the world itself.
yeah. Mhm.
So if one wants to go to a really heroic campaign, eventually we'll butt head with some of these big enemies. One are the Fae and the Nightmares of the Moons, Circuit. Another is
Right.
that there is a sort of undead hive mind that is controlled by this anti-pope, which is a powerful lich, and that is the nemesis of the angelic side. Another part is that there are the second sun on the desert in the Dwarven territory is probably expanding. So, and nobody knows what is actually underneath it, underneath the more intense light of the sun. And that is the light of the sun is creating something. So if exposed to
Okay.
the sun, things will grow on you. So something is underneath there. These are the big, like worldwide questions. Then the other conflicts tend to be smaller, but there are different sizes of conflict. But for example, I surely prefer smaller conflict. For example, if I ever do a campaign there, I will end at level 10 or something. 10 will be
Oh,
the top of the
that's a good
heroic
thing.
possible. Because, for example, now I'm playing a level 14, and it, for something it's wonderful because you like play in the big stage of the world, you are recognized by kings and stuff. But the more mundane things like combat, interaction, etc., is a chore.
Yeah,
So
very different.
10 is the sweet spot to feel powerful, but still everything is manageable.
I feel like even just 5 or 6 is enough to feel like
Oh,
that as
yes,
a
yes,
player.
yes. Usually, yes, but probably those are the best levels in a way. You feel you are actually doing something that the hard work of the previous level
Yeah,
paid
yeah.
off.
But yeah, when I started a campaign, I started one at 10th level where they were like supposed to be leading an army and fighting
Mm.
this other empire and that kind of stuff. And 10th level felt right for that.
Mm.
It fit.
Yes. No, it's very long the persistent question with the issue with D&D that is a system that is, does something good, but is used as a generalistic cultural system. So sometimes you see that the system just can't do that stuff.
Yeah. So one of the other interesting maybe threat or maybe not that you mentioned in your survey, the interesting for me was the demiurge. There was
Mhm.
like prophecies of its return.
Yes.
Um, is that something that you feel like is a real thing that you'd consider bringing in, or more just like you mentioned like having faith and it being no evidence kind of stuff?
No, I think that it can be the interesting thing for a GM. Then she can choose what
Hmm.
of the various religions is actually right. So because one of the main thing of that differentiates by religion and what and when the damage will come back.
Ah,
And
okay.
you can probably, I want to keep it vague, but it could be interesting for a gem to like go out on a limb and say, oh, I think that the devils are right. The gnomes that say that they will come from space are right. The orcs that think that they will come out of nothingness behind the reality are right. The dwarves that think that they will come from the second sun are right and choose, yes, I think they are the correct ones and go with the campaign in that direction.
Okay, so it's kind of open for the GM to decide
Yes,
what they want to do with it. Okay.
and yes, they can. I think, yes, but yeah, me too. I'm not sure what what it will happen soon in the year
Uh-huh.
1000 when it's supposed to happen something.
Yeah, I think there was some like in the year 1000 AD, like I think there was a bunch of like prophecies like that
Oh
that
yes,
people were talking about, and
all
and also 2000, and then nothing happened.
the power of the round number, excite the
Yeah.
imagination, and if there is something more of the round number. There are also some prophecy stuff. Because another thing is that in this world there is no the idea is that, for example, that is a sort of problem that I have if I want to move it to D&D, is that, for example, a lot of divination magic don't work because you have no gods to ask if something is going good or bad. So the idea is everything is like looking at the various possibilities and see what is the more probable. And doing so is like there is like inward there is no faith actually. And so, for example, also this prophecy may or may not be correct because
Hmm. Okay.
there is no metaphysical like basis for them to work.
That reminds me of this other thing I wanted to ask you about was the afterlife in this world, because usually that's thought of as like hell or heaven, and you've sort of made those smushed into the
Mm,
world.
mm.
So what happens when someone dies for their soul at this
Oh
point?
yes, that's a big point of contention. Yeah, it's the other big thing that differentiates various religion. The devil religion, angel religion, they are more or less mirror on each other. They just think that there is the soul is like ineffable and it will linger in reality until the demiurge will come, like last judgment style, and do a new hell, a new heaven, and sort the good and bad. But
Okay.
for the other, there are the beast people, the Tabaxi Minotaur, think that the mana field, the magic energy, are
Hmm.
the embryo of the new dimension. And so um, our action are shaping this other world, and we will end in hell or heaven of our making inside this mana field.
Okay.
But the more interesting are there are the another races of elves that are more like Mongols. They live in these steppes that are covered in ash, perennial elemental ash, and they think that their duty is to maintain an afterlife on Earth. So there are their nomadic paths are a big spell, an enormous spell that keeps the spirits in this world like conscious, and so that it's full of ghosts that are people that has died there or near there that are keep present and conscious by these multi-generational spells that is the migration path of the various clan of elves.
Okay. So there's a lot of variation for what people think is
Yes.
the what's the case there. Okay. I guess that brings up this other question. So, like you said, like divination magic works a bit differently.
Mm.
I'm assuming that there's other magic that would also work differently with how it's usually described in D&D. Like a lot of teleportation magic in D&D is really you leave the material plane briefly, you go into the astral plane, and then you come back to the material plane in a different spot. Is how it works in the traditional lore. And I'm assuming that's different.
Yes, that is a little different because the idea is that all teleportation and this kind of space magic is done by in portal style, like you pinch, you create hole in
Uh-huh.
space, and like beside this there is this dimensionless nothingness, and you can make a hole to come back to reality. And since there is no real distance in this nothingness, you can choose where to come up the other part. The idea is that reality is like a piece of paper, and you like pinch the piece of paper and come back from
Right.
the
Yeah.
bottom of the paper up.
Yeah. That four-dimensional space kind of thing.
Yeah, basically. The point is that since there is like really nothing in this nothingness, one can stay there. It's not impossible to create pocket dimension. Like is worse than the outer space like situation. So basically, the only teleportation is short, maybe medium distances, because the longer the furthest you want to go, the more the risk you lose yourself or something happen to you. The other thing is more precise you want to be, more time you have to spend in the nothingness. So there are dangers associated with the hostile environment.
Okay. Another question I had about that, not necessarily ghosts, because that's something that I'm assuming doesn't exist in your world, but
Well, there are some kind of ghostish things.
ghostish things. Okay. Because there's some other spells that let a character become like a ghost, with like etherealness lets you move through walls, and kind of ignore weapons unless they're magic and stuff like that.
Yeah. The idea is that the magic mana is divided in six colors, six domains.
Okay.
One is the red one that is substance and has to do with the materials, the matter. And then you can basically make things intangible by like removing some of the matter of a thing, making something less mattery. How would explain the thing?
Less substance.
So
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to say it either.
you make it a little unsubstantial in a way, so it works like it was passed through walls or something like that. But there is not a really ethereal plane. With an exception, there is a place where there are two spaces folded in each other. So this is this mist that is work like another space, so supposed to the our space. So it looks like animals and plants that live there are like ethereal ghosts that pass through things, but they are like
Mm.
because they are out of sync with the rest of the space.
Okay. Man. All right. Let me check my notes and see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about.
Now,
Great.
now speaking of undead, for example, the one thing is
Yeah.
that there are two kind of zombies. One are the one part of the collective mind or the hive mind of the antipope, and the other, which is, can be interesting, is that one of the feature of the devil, and they like their punishment, I can guess. And sometimes a life sentence is not enough. So some people is sentenced to unlife a sentence, and they are turned in zombie that do slave labor as a punishment for the crime. And people are incentivized, say they go ahead, you can like throw tomatoes on them, insult them, everything to add indignity to the punishment.
Let's
And the
see.
other thing is that in some places that are connected to the negative elements, like salt, dust, and ashes and void, sometimes a soul leave a imprint in these elements, and so there are some sort of ghosts. Some they believe there is actual a soul there, and some there is like a copy of a soul. But to keep their coherence, they need to feed on life energy that is the fuel of all magic,
Mm.
ultimately.
Okay. All right.
Mm.
It's got some logic there. Well, yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
We cover a lot of things. One of the when we missed the location, that is there is a city that is more or less in the center of the map. It's called
Uh-huh.
Mizani, and it is the place where the accord between the gods were signed. And there is the home of the only surviving divinity. So someone there still at Divine Spark. That is a Sphinx.
Oh.
That island is a place of like in Planescape will be the Outlands. It's a place of total neutrality and balance. There is like a city that is a copy in a way of the world, because every nation and every people has its district, and is the place of general commerce and interaction between the various nations, sometimes in a hostile way, sometimes in a friendly way, and that it all can go on. These enemies can go along because they have the fear and respect of someone who is actually in a way divine that is looking after them.
Yeah, sounds a bit like Sigil from the
Yes,
Planescape stuff. Yeah.
there is like a mundane sigil with the Lady of Pain that is in fact this Sphinx, which is
Hmm.
more mysterious than
Right.
that, but also the Lady of Pain was kind of mysterious. But instead of doors to other dimension stuff, there are like I don't know, the arsenal that build the ship as the dwarf quartet, the dwarf district, where the tribunal is the devil district, where is the hospital is the angel district.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, yeah. Anything else that you wanted to talk about?
But no, I think we have covered more or less everything, and I hope people enjoyed the
Yeah, I think it's really cool, especially with the art that
mm.
people aren't getting in the. But yes, why don't you tell people where people can find your stuff?
Okay. People can find my stuff on Instagram, Codex underscore Inversus. There is a subreddit dedicated to this word, r/Codex Inversus, one word. And if you want to read more comfortably the lore, I have also a profile on Medium with my name, Luca Vanzella.
Yep. And we'll put links to all this stuff in the episode description as well.
Thank you.
So one of the questions I usually ask people to close out on is, do you have any advice for other DMs? But I feel like that might not be the right question to ask you.
No, I'm probably
So maybe do you have any advice for other like RPG creators? Because that's kind of what you're doing at this point.
yes. And I think on a world building point of view, I found that sometimes starting really small, like with a dish, a kind of food, can, or for example, I don't know, a specific place, a monument, a little thing can sprung out all area, region, or even nation. Sometimes, so when you are scared that these things are getting too big, you can start small and you see that everything will start to make sense.
Yeah, no, I think starting small is definitely very good advice. I did that with my campaign and it made it so much easier.
Because I mean, you want to have a general like overview, but at some point it can be so uh, intimidating that no, just this. Let's start with just this village. Let's start with just this. I don't know. There is a special breed of horses. And we develop from that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, that's really good. All right, well, thank you, Luca. This is really cool,
Sure.
and
Thank you
I
to you.
encourage everyone to go check out the Instagram or the Reddit or the Medium because it is really just great art to accompany the descriptions. So people should look at that.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to follow Luca's work on Codex Inversus, he shares it on Reddit, Instagram, and Medium. There's links in the description, and you should really check it out just to see all the amazing art that he's put together. Additionally, we're in June now, which is when the voting for the Crit Awards is. Crit stands for Creator Recognition in TTRPGs. So that's a way for lots of independent people to be recognized in RPGs. If you'd like to choose who gets that award, you can go vote for your favorite at critawards.org. That's critawards.org. And thank you for listening.